Welcome back to the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors. It's me, Dreadnought Ryan, and today I want to talk about toy lines we need to see again. In the 80s, we were blessed with a huge amount of toys that we could purchase, whether it was at a Toys R Us, a KB Toys, Toy Palace, or even your local brick and mortar stores. In the 80s, we saw expansion of the toy aisles for Kmart's, Walmart's, Target's, whatever other retailer you had in your area. Kids were important. We were catered to. We had cartoons that were created as advertisement for these toy lines, comic books, you name it. All thanks to some of those rollbacks of regulations on what manufacturers could do to advertise towards kids. I think we all remember the days of looking over at those toy catalogs or the ads and circling all the toys that we wanted. And of course, seeing the successes that G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, Cabbage Patch, Barbie all had during the 80s. Toy companies understood that kids had buying power and they wanted to put out as many toys as they could, not only to fill all of those toy aisles, but also to fill all of our toy boxes. So today I want to talk about some of those toy lines. Now, many folks will talk about nostalgia is a big deal today, and yes, it is. But I think a lot of it also has to do with technology and the advancements in what we do have with action figures. You've seen some advancements such as Todd McFarlane with the Superpowers line, Mattel with the new He-Man figures, which he's added articulation to the elbows and knees, and of course G.I. Joe Classify, bringing the old 3 3/4-inch scale figures into the 6-inch forms while adding more articulation and more detail. With the advancements again in technology, not only with tooling, but printing, with paint apps, it allows for collectors to get some of those old figures that we used to have and make them look 100 times better than what they were. But we've also seen some throwbacks to those originals, like the real Ghostbusters by Kenner, who was re-released by Hasbro. They were stuck to the original form that they came out with originally. And it was nice to see some of those old throwback toys that we used to purchase in the toy aisles way back then. You also have the Secret Ward figures by Hasbro, where they're sticking to that 4-inch or 3 3/4-inch with the 5 points of articulation. You've also seen companies like Ramen Toys, which has come out with the Sky Commanders, which is a version of Centurions, Zinka Toys, which brought back out Sectars, as well as a number of other lines. Also, you have Fresh Monkey Fiction. All of these smaller toy manufacturers are filling in the gap for this nostalgia because, let's be honest, as collectors, we do want to relive some of those days as kids, but we want a little bit of a better quality. So the next few lines that we talk about are going to be lines that I want to see brought back, updated maybe, some just slightly changed, and then some completely changed. Let's get started. Again, like I said, Ramen Toys is filling the gap for a lot of these licensings that we don't see right now. They're working on a 1/18 scale version of the Mask Thunderhawk, and I can't wait to see what it looks like. This particular toy line was one of my favorites growing up because as a kid of the 80s, we all loved vehicles. Any of the TV shows that you watched back in the day, whether it was A-Team, Magnum PI, Kit from Knight Rider, heck, even Airwolf, they were all geared around vehicles. And with this particular line, it's the same way. These vehicles were highly detailed. They had rubber tires. They looked just like the vehicles they were based off of. And while the figures did not have a lot of detail as far as like the face and paint apps, they were still usable for these particular vehicles. Now, seeing a 1/18 scale version of all of these, I think would be amazing. If you've ever heard of Bruder Toys, they make tremendously awesome. I can't even think of any other words to describe how amazing these are, but they're literally 1/16, 1/18 scale real life vehicles, whether it's a semi truck, it's a bulldozer, it's a garbage truck, so that we know there are companies out there that can fill in that gap. But of course, Mask had that transforming feature. I think with this particular brand, as great as it would see to be brought up into a bigger scale, I think that cost may hinder that. I think if we could bring that back in the original scale and with the advancements that we've had in technology, you could add more detail to these figures, but still offer this type of cool toy to not only collectors, but to kids. And I think it could be a home run for both collectors and kids if we can get these in the original scale. Next up is Dino Riders. I still don't understand why we do not have this relaunched. I honestly can't. Whether it's a licensing issue or if just Jurassic Park doesn't want to share the dinosaur business, but kids and adults all love dinosaurs. And what's better than having a dinosaur? Let's have a dinosaur that's all geared up for battle. These particular toys were awesome back in the day, as you could take your Tyrannosaurus, your Brontosaurus, your Velociraptor, and take them off to war. Having figures that could fit along with them, having little expansion packs that you could add different features to them. I just think this is another one that would be an absolute home run. Bring it back in its original scale, and let's let kids and adult collectors relive the good old days of Dino Riders. Next is in Humanoids. Now, I know I can hear the groans from here, but hear me out on this. In Humanoids were wonky with how the good guys looked. They were in exosuits. And when you pop the helmets off, it would be a really like a 4 inch or a 3 to 3/4 inch head. But it's the monsters what made this line. If you could bring this particular line back in, let's say the same size as G.I. Joe or Marvel Legends at 6.5 inch scale, having your good guys with exosuits that would clip on more so than just be, body molded on for tooling, which would allow for some customization for collectors, but also it would help with bringing and scaling in the monsters at maybe like a 7, 8, or 9 inch scale. It would make the world more relatable to today's standards for collectors. You could still have some of the same action features that they came with, but I think it would be geared more towards the tooling and articulation, as well as just seeing some of these great figures on your shelf. There's such a wacky kind of line. Imagine what it would look like now with all the technology and scaling and also the tooling that you could do to make your monsters look just absolutely bonkers. So yeah, Inhumanoids is a must for me. Visionaries. This particular line was Hasbro, and it was in a 4 inch, 4.5 inch scale. You had the Darkling Lords and the Spectral Knights. It was a line that was built around magic and technology. They did have a cartoon as well as a comic book. These figures had great articulation for back in the day. They also had one of the coolest features, 3D holograms that were included the figure's chest piece, but also on the totems that they carried around. Now, for this particular action figure line, I've seen what Hasbro did with I believe it was a San Diego Comic Con set where they brought back the Visionary, but it put a sticker on there for his totem. I think you have to go back to doing the holograms with these particular figures. And if that means that the cost for doing the holograms makes it harder for, let's say, a Hasbro to do this, this would be a perfect opportunity for, let's say, like someone like Super 7 or a smaller company to license this and give us the figures that we need in that bigger scale. I think the Visionaries could scale well with either any of your magic fantasy type lines. The Four Horsemen have created a number of different figures. You have Awok. These would just fill into a nice niche out there. I mean, we've seen Dungeons and Dragons be re-released. Why can't we get Visionaries? And finally, my personal wish is Starr. Oh, I know a lot of people didn't like this particular line. It was weird and the backstory was different, and I get that. But there's just something about see-through plastic that just had me at hello. And seeing this particular line scaled up into the 6.5 inch scaling, as well as having that see-through plastic, I think would just be awesome. Again, this is a smaller line, so you don't have to create as many figures, but just give us the base good guys, bad guys, and then maybe some of the creatures that were included as well, too. I can understand if this particular line doesn't lend itself well to one of the bigger manufacturers, but again, like I said, we've seen smaller toy creators who can come in and fill in these lines and fill out these licenses and give collectors what they're looking for. I know this particular line wasn't successful in the 80s as kids, but I remember the first Starr figure that I got and how I fell in love with just the amazing technology that they had to create not only the little prism item that it came with, but just the fact that you could see through the figures. Putting a flashlight behind it to get some of the effects of it, you know, going up on the wall of your room. It just made it fun. So this is another one of those lines I would love to see. Maybe a limited run at like a San Diego Comic-Con or some other con where you could see it. But I just think this would be a fun line to see come back out, especially with the advancements in articulation as well as in the paint apps and deco. So again, thank you everyone who's been supporting the Island of Misfit Toys, not only from the very beginning, but also all of the folks who've moved on to the island. Truly, again, I know I say it every time, but you guys are the best. Absolutely the best. It's what makes this community great is all of you and the support that you've shown, the coaching that you've given me, the ideas for the shows. You guys are all awesome. And thank you again for your support and your kind words. I know there's probably other lines that I've forgotten out there. There's probably figures that we've seen created by a third party that you're like, dude, you forgot this. Please let me know in the comments which lines you would like to see, and maybe we can come back and revisit those as well too. Again, thank you again and again and again for all the support that you guys have been giving me. You're all awesome. I hope you have a great day, evening, morning, depending on where you're at on the island. But more importantly, you guys all stay awesome. And I'll be talking to